Um, good afternoon and welcome to AuthorSpeak at the Norwalk Public Library. Today, we're so happy to have Norwalk author Bette Bono here to discuss her new novel, Fear Itself. Bette joined the library writers group back in the spring of 2014. Our writers group continues to thrive and is now led by our writing instructor, Kim Kovach. Bette shared the beginning concept and early writing of her series with all of us in our classes. We all congratulate Bette on her wonderful achievement in the publication of this, her second novel. Bette Bono's writing mixes many things she loves, including history, mystery, time travel, adventure, romance, senior citizens, and superheroes. She doesn't believe the last 2 or 3 categories are mutually exclusive. Her characters are members of the American Association of Remarkable Persons, the other AARP group of senior citizens who use their time travel ability to solve mysteries in the past. And I just wanted to add this. I had to, on Thursday, speak to the AARP in Norwalk about library services. So I told them all about Bette's
the
AARP. Before beginning her writing career, Bette pursued a variety of other interests. She worked as a political analyst in Washington, D.C., then earned a law degree from Harvard and relocated to Connecticut. After a decade of work as an attorney, Bette turned to public school teaching here in Norwalk, serving both in the classroom and as union steward. Bette is the author of the historical fiction time travel novels, The Better Angels and Fear Itself, and soon to be released short story collection, Neighbors and Other Stories. When Bette isn't writing, she works in her garden, hikes through parks and nature preserves, visits historic sites, explores local libraries, and listens to people tell their life stories. So I'm so pleased today to introduce our friend Bette Bono.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for arriving and for tuning in. Thank you to the Norwalk Public Library for hosting this. And as I've explained, it's been an interesting day because we sprang a leak in the basement. So a plumber is going to arrive. The only time they could come was between 2 and 4, but my wonderful husband is going to escort the plumber when he or she arrives down to the basement. And I've already lost internet once. So if I do disappear, I'll be back. It just might take a few minutes. It's been, as I said, an interesting day. The program is going to last about an hour. And I hope we can do 3 things. First, I do want to talk about my book, Fear Itself, which is, as Cindy noted, it's a historical fiction, time travel, mystery, romance, adventure. And second, I want to show you a few pictures. I have a very short slideshow. I want to show you a few pictures of some of the sites that are in the book. The book is not illustrated, but I want to show you some pictures of the sites and some of the people that are mentioned in the book. And third, we can open it up for questions or comments. And I'm sure there'll be time for that. So first, about the book. Fear Itself, here's my book, is a sequel to my first book, The Better Angels. And if you haven't read The Better Angels, it's about a retired teacher, Aggie May, who fears she's getting dementia because she begins to see scenes from the past that shouldn't be there. She sees World War II soldiers in Grand Central. She sees an old propeller airplane overhead. And she discovers that, like a few very gifted seniors, she has developed the ability to travel in time. She's recruited by a man who's my other main character, Abe Irving, into the other AARP, the American Association of Remarkable Persons. And it's basically a group of senior citizens who attempt to explore the past, report on the past, and solve mysteries in the past. And they all work together in what seems to be your normal retirement community. It's a place called the Lodge, and they gather there to plan their missions. So what I try to combine in my novels are 2 things I'm very interested in. One is obviously American history. The time period in The Better Angels was Civil War era New York City. And the mystery was around the photography of Matthew Brady, who was a Civil War era photographer. And in Fear Itself, the time period is the 1930s. And in particular, it looks at two groups that were active in the United States at that time, the isolationist group, America First, and the, excuse me, the explicitly pro-Hitler, pro-fascist group, the German American Boond. The second thing I tried to do with my writing is I'm interested in writing about older characters. And I'm interested in trying to break through the stereotypes that are often used to box in or marginalize older people by creating characters that have adventures, that have a superpower, that fall in love, that are rounded characters. So I want to start with that second idea about older characters and read you like 5 minutes of a scene from Fear Itself, where the seniors are talking about the way they are perceived and the roles they are given as seniors. It begins, they've gathered together and they're waiting for a meeting. They're going to start a meeting to talk about their new mission. And they start talking about being a senior citizen. I don't like the way old folks are caricatured as never late for a meal, Viola remarked. In Florida, restaurants have senior pricing for the dinner menu at about 4 in the afternoon because they assume we all want to eat early, then go home and be in bed by 8. And everyone thinks it's so funny. Or cute, Bernice added. Every senior I see in a commercial, at least seniors of the female persuasion, is either on the floor saying she can't get up or in any of a variety of situations where she's just so darn cute. You're right, Viola said. I particularly dislike that stereotype. I don't like older people being portrayed as half adult, half child. Bernice made a noise. What? Viola asked. You love being cute. You use that stereotype to your advantage every chance you get. Well, sometimes it's necessary to be a little devious, especially in the context of fieldwork. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the roles we're given in society, about how we're characterized and the little file folders we're put in as senior citizens. I'll tell you what they are, Bernice answered promptly. She raised her hand and ticked them off on her fingers. We can be grandma, cat lady, and volunteer. And maybe if you're really rich like Lillian, you can be a wealthy matriarch. Don't forget Cougar and Spinster, Julie added. Frank looked at them, obviously at a loss. I'm not sure I'm following this, he said to Maurice, but I'm getting the sense it might be better right now to just shut up and listen. I don't think Cougar and Spinster are used too much these days, Viola said. Those terms might be out of date. I hope you're right, Julie said. She turned to Frank to explain. A spinster is a woman who's never been married. It's often used in a derogatory way because some people think a woman who's never been married has obviously not had any kind of meaningful life at all. A cougar is an older woman who keeps herself fit in order to have sexual relationships with younger men. There's a whole lot of misogyny there as well. Like being fit is only related to how men perceive you. And there's the implication that sexuality should be off limits for seniors, especially women. Okay, Frank said, looking embarrassed. He reached for another croissant. I sort of figure that being fit is about being fit for yourself, you know, and for your team if you're in a team sport. That's because you were a coach, Julie said, a good one. Out of grandma, cat lady, and volunteer, your best option is volunteer. If you don't want to be pigeonholed, Bernice said. But sometimes you get boxed in with that too. You can be with a philanthropic group or a historical society. If it's more of a male-dominated group, they might have a ladies' auxiliary. You can be a library volunteer and push one of those little carts around and reshelf books and read to kids, but you're not going to be a volunteer for a dangerous mission like parachuting out of a plane to carry a message behind enemy lines. I mean, I'd volunteer for that, but people don't usually see seniors in that role. Of all those roles, most people regard grandma as the pinnacle of achievement, Julie said. Viola grimaced. Yes, and it can be limiting. She saw the way the others stared at her. I know, dears, I'm a grandma myself. I adore the grandbabies and great-grandbabies, and I love my time with them. I'm happy to pass around pictures and brag about them for hours, but my relationship with those wonderful children does not define my entire life. Then how shall we define ourselves? Aggie asked. Who are we now? Who are we here? Ah, Viola said, now, isn't that an interesting question? I think we're all still working on that, Frank said. Guys, too. Older men aren't relegated to the Grandma Cat Lady volunteer playlist, Julie said. They're limited, but not in the same way. Yes, older men have a few more options, Viola agreed. They can be senators and sit on boards of directors. I was teaching on the day John Glenn went up in the space shuttle in 1998, Aggie said. He was 77 years old. I had arranged for a big screen to be put up in the cafeteria after lunch. We had a good principal in the building that year. She let every class go watch if they wanted to. There was a launch delay and I was afraid the students would be called to their buses, but then the countdown started and that beautiful liftoff came. Having him on board was special. I watched with a group of friends, Viola said. We had champagne and toasted him and said, Godspeed, John Glenn. We were all so moved. We knew what our own lives were like and how unusual the whole situation was. I wanted to say Godspeed to all of us older people who have things to do, Maurice said. That's it, Aggie said, who have things to do. So there we have some of my older characters confronting, trying to grapple with what I call sort of a coming of age story for seniors. Who are we? Who are the characters as they age and have things to do? So the second issue that I like to focus on in my writing is history. And the history part of Fear Itself, as I said, focuses on the 1930s. In the novel, an elderly woman she's in her 80s, Kaya Reese, who escaped Nazi Germany as a child when her parents put her on the Kindertransport. She asks the time traveler, she's now an American citizen, and she asks the time travelers to learn about what was going on in the United States as Hitler rose to power. And she's particularly interested in finding out about the isolationist organization, America First, and the pro-Hitler group, the German American Boond. And essentially the question she's asking is how could people in the United States claim they didn't know what Hitler's Germany was about? And how could some people here have supported him? So the time travelers go back in the book to see rallies that were held at Madison Square Garden in New York by both of these organizations. What I'd like to do now very quickly is show you a few of those pictures as we talk about the history. So maybe Cindy, if I could share my screen, we could, I don't know if I'm set up to share the screen. There we go, share screen. Let's share. And I hope you can see the slideshow and we can begin it and go through some pictures. If it begins. There we go. Okay. Here are the books, and we have here a quote from Abe when he first recruited Aggie. Some people, very few people, as they age, he shot her a look as if worried she might take exception to the word. They developed the ability to move into the past. So the past we're going to begin with is 1933. A lot happens in 1933, and this is intended to just give you a mosaic picture first. At that time, presidents were inaugurated in March, and on March 4th, FDR is inaugurated. He gives the speech that I took the title from. He says, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Now he's talking, of course, about the Great Depression. But as we now know, there would be a lot more to fear in the coming years. Hitler also comes to power in 1933. He becomes chancellor on January 30th, and By March, we're going to talk a little bit more about German history in a minute, but by March, he will have absolute power. But in 33, FDR begins the programs of the first 100 days. A lot else is going on. The Golden Gate Bridge is being built. They begin construction on January 5th. The Lone Ranger, the first radio broadcast of the Lone Ranger is sent out over the radio. King Kong premieres on March 2nd. There's a poster from the original movie. Mount Rushmore is dedicated. It's not completed, but it becomes part of the National Park Service. The board game Monopoly, we have that down here, appears in March of 1933. The first fireside chat is on March 12th of 1933. In Germany, we'll see the first concentration camp is completed in March of 1933. The March 31st, the Civilian Conservation Corps is completed. There is, during the summer, it opens on May 27th, a World's Fair in Chicago, Century of Progress. And a couple of things about this. I have in a scrapbook of my mother's, I have a little picture, a little souvenir picture from the Century of Progress in 1933. Her parents took her and her sister. So my mother was 8 when she went. I have a picture of her as a child at the World's Fair in a little souvenir frame. At the World's Fair, Mussolini sends his air marshal over with 24 flying boats, and they land on Lake Michigan. And in October, the Graf Zeppelin comes, and there's a big swastika on its tail, and it circles around the city of Chicago over the fairgrounds. In June, the first drive-in movie opens up in New Jersey. In November, Fiorello LaGuardia is sworn in as mayor of New York City. Prohibition is repealed in December. Some of the literature, the great literature, 2 Nancy Drew books came out in 1933, 9 and 10. One of them, I thought this was really interesting. One of them, The Password to Larkspur Lane, is actually about some people, abusing senior citizens, and Nancy helps them out. So I thought that was kind of cool. Now, if we look just at Germany, I had in the book some discussions about some of the seniors saying, people think Hitler sort of came out of nowhere in 1939 or 1940, but he comes to power in 33. And if you look at the character of the regime and how things happen very, very quickly there, it's kind of shocking. He becomes chancellor in January. There's the Reichstag fire, which Hitler uses as a way to seize power. Goebbels is brought in March. The first concentration camp, Dachau, under the program put together by Heinrich Himmler, is completed in March. I put in red the Enabling Act, which gives Hitler absolute power. William Shirer, who wrote Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, says about the Enabling Act that the Reichstag passed this act and thereby committed suicide because they turned over all controls, any sort of legislative authority they might have had over Hitler, and it's gone after March 23rd. Look at what happens in April, and I only put some of the things. Boycott of Jewish-owned shops on the 1st. On the 7th, Jews are ousted from the civil service. On the 11th, there's a decree defining who is and who is not Aryan. On the 25th, 3 things: limits on children in public schools, Jewish children in public schools, and severe limits on Jews practicing in the medical and legal fields. By May 2nd, all the unions are gone. Their offices are raided, their money is stolen, and they're done with as any kind of a political force. In May, the book burnings that we associate with the Nazis, the first organized book burnings occur, often in university towns. The one in Berlin had 40,000 people that were spectators. There was a broadcast over the radio, and book burnings went on periodically. But as is mentioned in the book, often what happened was that books were simply confiscated as people were sent to the camps. In July, all non-Nazi political parties are gone. By September, Jews are banned from any kind of involvement in agriculture and also banned from anything in the arts, whether that's film, musicians, actors, and so on. By October, the press is controlled, where editors have to be Aryan, and nothing, by law, nothing can be printed that is deemed misleading about the Reich. Now, we know some of these other very significant dates I put over here that happened later, but all of this happens in 33. In 35, the Nuremberg laws are passed. There are two parts of those. One part takes citizenship away from Jews, and the second part makes it a criminal offense and bans any sexual relationship or marriage between what is called an Aryan and a Jew. Kristallnacht happens in 1938. Within a few weeks, the Kindertransport begins, which was a program started in England by Jewish organizations and the Quakers, who go and see Neville Chamberlain and say, we have to, I know there are limits on immigration, but we have to at least let in the children. They did not let in the parents, but children were sent. And you see, that's what the photograph is of children, often with no luggage at all, maybe something that they were holding, and they were sent to England. World War II, of course, begins on September 1st. So here's a very quick look at the two organizations that are featured in the book. The German-American Boond begins in 1936. It's the successor organization for something called the Friends of New Germany. They were explicitly anti-Semitic and explicitly pro-Hitler. You can see this is a photo of the rally that is mentioned in the book. It was on February 20th, 1939. And at Madison Square Garden, it's a shame it's not in color, because you would see the American flags here, the Betsy Ross flag, the American flag, there's a portrait of Washington. And then these flags here, which are, sort of faded out, are the flag of the German-American Bund. This is a picture of Fritz Kuhn, who is sort of brought down because he embezzled money from the Bund. This is another picture from the rally. People did give the Nazi salute. They did not say Sieg Heil, they said Free America. But it was said in the same kind of way as Sieg Heil, only they said Free America. Down in the corner, there's a picture of one of the camps. Another thing the Boond did, which was interesting and horrifying in a way, is they would set up these big summer camps, places where families could go and get a cabin and spend the weekend, where rallies could be held. And also they were used as children's sleepaway camps in the summer. There was a huge one in New Jersey, a huge one on Long Island. Throughout the Midwest, there were some of these camps. They tried to put one here in Connecticut, in Southbury. And Southbury at the time was a tiny little community. They had about 1,500 residents. They discovered some Boond members clearing land, agricultural land that had been purchased, and realized what was planned. And they very quickly organized a zoning commission, which they didn't have before. So the importance of municipal power here, and zoned the land for agricultural use only. So eventually the Boond gave up and did not put a large Boond camp here in Connecticut. America First. America First is interesting. You can see the date. America First begins after the war in Europe has started. It begins as discussions on the Yale Law School campus with students talking about isolationism. And they were often also critical of the New Deal. And by the fall, the organization is founded, it's set up with headquarters, and it is based in Chicago for a number of reasons. There were quite a few conservative businessmen there. There was also in the Midwest a large German-American community. So it's founded in 1940. The chairman is Robert E. Wood, who he's brought in. He was in the military in World War I, and he was also the head of Sears Roebuck and Company. If you remember that department store. I grew up in Illinois, so you know I'm quite familiar with that. Compared to the Boond, their membership was much larger. To be a member of the Boond, you had to be what they called Aryan. To be a member of America First, you didn't. Most of the historians I've read put the membership number at about 800,000, but that would be like dues paying members. And when they would have events, they would often get many, many supporters who were not officially members, but it was a much more significant organization in a certain way. They had about 450 chapters around the country. Their strongest state was Illinois, where they had about 60 chapters. I found in one old book a reference to there was an America First chapter in Norwalk. And I have not yet been able to find anything more. The reference is in a book that was written in the 1970s. There are no digital records. I think it's based on that author's going through piles of boxes about America First. But so I don't know, unfortunately, anything more, but Norwalk did have an America First chapter. Now, Lindbergh becomes their spokesperson. So let's talk a little bit about Lindbergh. There he is. The way I first learned about Charles Lindbergh was in the Jimmy Stewart movie. I think it's Jimmy Stewart, Spirit of St. Louis. And it's about him crossing the Atlantic Ocean, the first solo flight across the Atlantic Ocean. It was done in 1927 when he was a 25-year-old aviator. He becomes an instant nationwide celebrity, the celebrity of the 1920s. Very well known. Everybody recognized him. There were parades, there were newspaper articles, seen as a great triumph of aviation, which it was. His family is hit with terrible tragedy in 1932 when their 20-month-old son is kidnapped and killed. And the trial of the kidnapper becomes front page news across the country. The family, sadly, is pursued and harassed by journalists. And finally, Lindbergh decides he has to leave the country. Late in December of 1935, he and his wife, and they'd had another son by that time, leave for Europe. And for the next, till about January of 1939, they stay in Europe. Now, they spend time in France, they spend a lot of time in England, and they are asked, Lindbergh is asked at some point by the US military to go to Germany to assess German aviation, because it's obvious the Germans are building up their Air Force. So he agrees to go, and he will visit several times in that period from about 1936 to 38. His last trip to Germany is in 39, December of 39. No, I'm sorry, January of 39. So you see here in this picture, here's one picture. He was hosted by Goering, usually when he was there. This is Goering here. This is Lindbergh here. Lindbergh begins to express some criticisms of Nazi Germany, but some admiration as well. And everything I've read about him shows that Lindbergh was very interested in the eugenics movement, and we know something about that, and had anti-Semitic impulses. He found some things to criticize, but he found some things to compliment about Nazi Germany. But he comes back, he's still a national celebrity, and he is recruited, he becomes the spokesman for America First. The rally in the book that I wrote about, he speaks at Madison Square Garden. He spoke at many places around the country. And in a speech at in Iowa, Lindbergh finally, sort of instead of speaking in kind of dog whistle language, he finally says that he denounces three groups that he says are pushing the United States into the war: the British, the Roosevelt administration, and the Jews. And he is roundly criticized, but also roundly applauded for this statement. And America First, while sort of scrambling to distance themselves from that statement, they also receive thousands and thousands and thousands of letters agreeing with what Lindbergh said. I wanted to show you two more things very quickly. When I do research for a book, I'm always like surprised by things. And this was a big surprise. I had just read the text. I mean, this is why pictures are so important. I had read that Lindbergh was named Man of the Year on Time magazine, and Hitler was named Man of the Year. So actually, Lindbergh was the first Man of the Year. They did this issue after his flight in 1927, and they just called him Man of the Year in their January issue. The man of the previous year is Lindbergh, but people liked that issue so much, they said, let's name somebody Man of the Year. Well, now it's Person of the Year every year. So Lindbergh was the first, and the popularity of that article led to everyone else that was named Man of the Year. I had seen several Time magazine covers that had portraits of Hitler, either painted portraits or photographs. And I had assumed in my mind that that's what was on the cover. When I finally tracked down, I said, I want to see the exact picture that was used. This is the picture on the right. And it's by a surrealist Austrian artist named Rudolf Charles von Ripper. And first, just looking at the picture, Hitler is the small figure seated at the organ. The setting is a cathedral that has been turned into this bizarre fair. There are bodies hanging from the Ferris wheel. There are some people just blithely riding the merry-go-round, paying no attention. Other people are sort of looking on. And the caption reads, "From the unholy organist, a hymn of hate." So on a very mainstream magazine, January 1939, this is how they announced that Hitler is the Man of the Year. So you have to draw conclusions from that about what people understood, what even the mainstream presentation or understanding of what Hitler was about is. Von Ripper, the artist, was born in Austria. He traveled around quite a bit. He lived for a while in Berlin pre-Hitler. He was like a member of the French Foreign Legion for a while, and then he came back to Germany. And when he goes back to Germany, Hitler has taken over, and von Ripper has anti-Nazi literature on him that he intends to distribute. He's picked up by the Gestapo. He's brought to a concentration camp. He's tortured. Eventually, he is let go, and he leaves and spends some time in England, but then comes to the United States and earns his living as an artist. And during the war, he enlists. He becomes a US citizen during World War II. He enlists and he becomes an OSS agent working for the Americans. A very interesting person. And this was a surprise to me, finding this picture. Last thing I want to show you is just like, we say Madison Square Garden. It's like everybody knows what it is, right? Well, there have been four. There are four Madison Square Gardens. There were. The first two actually were near Madison Square. They were in the northeast corner of Madison Square of the park. The first one was this one was sort of an open air arena structure. It was leased by P.T. Barnum, among others. It did not make money, so they tore it down. This second structure, same location, designed by the very famous architect Stanford White. It had a beautiful, huge theater inside. It had a restaurant, a garden, and Stanford White not only designed it, he met his end there. He was shot and killed while at dinner at this building in the restaurant by the husband of a woman that Stanford White had abused when she was a teenager and exploited. And there's a really interesting quote by Mark Twain about the trial of the man that shot Stanford White. And Mark Twain, in the second volume of his autobiography, talks about how it's well known that Stanford White and others were men that were predators and that preyed on young women. And again, a surprise to see the cross links. Down here, the current building at the bottom of the screen, and then the large picture is the building of Madison Square Garden, number 3, where the rallies are held between 8th and 9th Avenue and 49th and 50th Streets in New York City. What's there now is called One Worldwide Plaza. It's a relatively new development, and there's like a big law firm there and other clients. So I wanted to sort of finish up this part of the program by reading again, another 3-minute little excerpt here from the book. One of the things that I couldn't get by researching, that I had to try to get close to in the research, is what it would feel like or be like to be at one of these rallies. So I wanted to read a very short section there. One of the characters, Frank, who goes back and he's talking to Kaya, the older woman who had asked for the seniors to go on this mission. He's trying to explain how he felt at the German-American Boond rally. And he starts off by saying, it was like being at a ball game in a nightmare. And then he says, oh, that's so stupid. And then she encourages him to continue. Kaya leaned forward and placed a lined hand on his sleeve. Please go on. I asked you to go back in time to see that awful pageant. Whatever you saw, whatever you thought is important to hear. Frank collected himself. Okay. I know you and Timmy and Giselle like to see baseball in the summer. When you see a game, you're there with all these people, the stadium's full. Everyone's focused on the field. When a guy hits one out of the park, or you see a neat double play, or even when a guy strikes out, there's a sound that comes up like a single giant voice from the stadium. Being in that crowd in the garden was like that. It was like that if the world was upside down. His voice changed, grew quieter, but more intense. I know I'm not making sense here. Keep going, Julie said. You're doing fine. Okay, Frank said. So here's the deal. When you see a game, especially a daytime game, you're outside and the sun is shining. You're happy and maybe you're with a couple pals or your best girl. You maybe have a beer. You can yell at the ump and the other team and maybe some of your own guys if they're knuckleheads. At the beginning of the game, you stand up for the national anthem and feel patriotic in a good kind of way. When it's time for the 7th inning stretch, you're on your feet again and you're glad to be where you are. And you're just happy to be a part of that crowd in the stadium, watching the game. And you never really just watch, you're a part of it. In that Boond crowd at the garden, it was like that. Everyone was focused on the show, what was happening on the stage, who was giving a speech and who was marching in. But it wasn't just watching. Like at a ball game, it's never just watching. The folks there were a part of it. There was the same kind of excitement, a feeling like everyone was in it together, but it was a sick kind of excitement. It was us versus them, and them was the Jews. There were signs all around the room saying horrible things. And it was an upside down world. It was hateful. I wanted to grab some of those guys by the lapels and shake them good. I wanted to tell them about the camps and the moms holding their babies as they went into the gas chambers. Giselle spoke. And they wouldn't have believed you, even if they accepted that you were from the future and had seen what was coming. They wouldn't have believed you, because who could believe something like that? Oh, my love, I'm not sure that's so, Kaya said. Fascism always starts with the small steps, but everyone knows that small steps lead to bigger ones. I'm not sure it's accurate to say the end result couldn't be envisioned. That's an excuse. People want to excuse themselves to others and to themselves, but it's not the same as not knowing where things could end up. There were a whole lot of rationalizations for supporting Hitler. Some said he was restoring the economy. Some said there was money to be made. Some liked the power. But how many never imagined what might happen when you vilify and demonize a whole group of people? Was there really that complete failure of imagination? They thought he could be checked, Giselle said. Did they ever think they might be wrong? Kai asked. After the rallies, the power grab, Kristallnacht, all of it, did they really think they could stop that juggernaut? Viola stirred in her seat. What we saw then were people who knew or should have known something really bad would happen. It had already started to happen. What kind of person are you if you know for sure something bad will happen and you do nothing? So that's my book. If people have questions or comments, if we have a little bit of time, I'd love to talk with you about it.
Bette, may I just say, after reading the book, it's frighteningly similar to what's happening in our country today and in the world, probably. Being born in 45, I wasn't, it was after the war, so my parents didn't talk about it much because it was over for them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was disturbing. It's disturbing history, and that's part of why I wanted to write about it, because it's disturbing history, but it's for many people, it's not history that's well known. When an organization is called America First, where did that come from? What did that represent in our history, in American history?
Hi, Bette, I have a question for you. Can you talk a little bit about, why you chose this period in history and, some of the other options for, some other periods in history that you might have wanted to, represent with your work?
That's a wonderful question. I chose this period, first of all, because I'd always been interested in it. And second, because of what Sheila just said, I think it's really relevant to some things that are going on now, with the sort of fascination with someone who could be a leader, the downgrading of, and the vilifying of other people. But it isn't a period of time that I've always been fascinated with. I grew up in Illinois, as I said, and my parents were members of the Book of the Month Club. I don't know if people remember that, but was like a subscription thing, and they would send you a bestseller. Sometimes you'd be given a choice of bestsellers, and you'd get a book every month. So about 1960, 61, 62, I don't remember exactly. The selection that was mailed to our house was Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shirer. I was 10, 11, 12 when it arrived. Much too young to read it. But one day I had nothing to read, hadn't gone to the library, and I pull it out and begin reading. And it was like an introduction in a frightening way, but also a fascinating way to history and to an adult world of understanding the past. It's interesting. My sister, who reads more history than I do, who's here, we were just talking about, she just recently reread Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And she said, you know, I think I have the original copy. And she looked inside, and it's the copy that was sent to our house in 1960, whatever, 1960, say. She has that original copy that I read. So I've always been interested in that period of time. So that's why I chose it. I'm starting to look at, for the next book, I want to write another, at least one more. I mean, I want to write a lot more in the series. And I'm looking at the progressive era, as I said, because there were a lot of interesting women who were doing really interesting things, particularly as journalists. And also it was when the settlement house movement was getting going with Jane Addams. And as I said, I grew up north of Chicago, and that was going on. So I'm reading now. I don't have a plot yet, but
I really wish I had you as a history teacher in school. Just want to say, I'm like mesmerized by your history lesson. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So my question is kind of tying off of Krista's. What made you want to tie the Kindertransport into your story?
That's it. One thing is that I thought it was really interesting, and particularly when people were talking just a few years ago about separation of children and how children were separated at our own border not too many years ago. And here's this historical similarity, and the issue of immigration was very important. And I include some things in the book about that. But there had been a big conference the summer, I believe it was the summer before Kristallnacht occurs. There had been a big conference about what do we do about Jewish refugees, and there were dozens of countries that had attended. It was held in Evian, France. The United States was there, and everyone was concerned. No one would allow more immigration. So it was the idea of separating children. At least this was one program that did allow some children to escape. I wanted someone who had that direct connection to the evils of what Hitler was doing. And so I had to work out, she would have been a child, but there certainly could be someone who got out that way. And I was just very interested in it. I know, Jesse, I know you've read a lot of books about the Kindertransport yourself. And I just think it was a really interesting program. It was a remarkable effort. It was also, it should have been more. It should have allowed in the adults. Many of the children that got out did not have good experiences. There was a similar program that was proposed in the United States, and I mentioned this in the book as well, but it was opposed by an anti-Semitic senator and was killed, and FDR let it be killed because the senator was anti-Semitic, but he was also in favor of building up the military, and so Roosevelt felt he needed him. So there was no, the effort said it kind of came and then died in the United States to get out more children.
Hi, Betty. This is just terrific. And it just, the blending of history with seniors and is just inspiring. I wanted to know when the deal will be for the movie rights, and which current actors or actresses who are seniors do you see in either of the two books that you wrote?
I mean, in my dreams, but let's get real here. I mean, I'm an independent author who started writing as a senior, who was fortunate enough to find a wonderful publisher, All Things That Matter Press, which is a traditional publisher, but it's like a, small, very small operation. I don't have the ability to market. I mean, in my dreams, I think they would make wonderful movies, because like, who wouldn't want to see some of these remarkable older actors and actresses in those roles? And, and there'd be like a gazillion roles for older people and a few roles for younger people, but I would love to see the tryouts and have someone say, oh, I'm sorry, you're terrific, but you're just too young. We can't use you. You're too young for this. So yeah, it would be wonderful, but I also try to like stay on the planet in terms of my expectations. And I'm happy. I'm happy that the books have been published and have found some readers and some interest.
Bette, what was your favorite part of the publishing? Oh, no, go ahead.
I just wanted to chime in on that and say that I read both of the books and I love them, as you already know. And I do think they would make great little movies. That's all.
So Bette, what was your favorite part of the publishing journey and what was your least favorite part of the publishing journey?
Well, my favorite part was that I found a publisher, but I had set for myself as an older author, as an older writer, I knew that, the avenue to, like, say, getting an agent and then submitting to one of the big name publishers was really closed off to me because and it would take too much time. Sometimes the search for an agent takes years, a year, 2 years or more. And then the agent begins to look around. And it used to be also that if you had an agent, you would get a contract. Not necessarily the case, but I used the resources of the library, Newark Public Library. And there are some resources called, the most important one I think is called the Writer's Market. And it's a list of publishers and it comes out a new edition every year. You can get it at the library. And there are publishers out there that will accept directly from writers, not from agents. And there are also publishers out there that specialize, I couldn't say, oh, is mine a romance? Is mine a sci-fi? Is mine a historical fiction? So I had that issue, but I just began submitting. I thought I will give it a year. If nothing happens in a year, then I will self-publish. And I submitted to, I would say, a dozen places. I got 9 rejections outright. One of them was really nice. It was, and gave me a lot of feedback and encouragement. And it was being looked at by 3 publishers, and one of them offered me a contract, and I accepted. So I was very lucky, but it's difficult. And so. But my favorite part was getting that email. And my husband and I were on our way up to his college reunion, and we stopped for gas, and I was checking my email, and I said, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So I was incoherent the whole rest of the time, but it's a good memory.
What was your inspiration for the cover?
Well, the first cover, I am fortunate. I mean, I have a wonderful family, and it's like touches my heart that so many family members are here. But I am very, very lucky. First of all, that I live near New York City, so I can go in and see some of the places. And secondly, my wonderful brother-in-law, Douglas Bicklin, who was a professor and the dean of the School of Education at Syracuse University, has retired from that and is a fine arts photographer. So for both covers, I wanted it to be a photograph, and I wanted it to be of a place that's important for the story, and where an important scene takes place. So for The Better Angels, an important scene takes place there when Aggie goes back in time because she knows her late husband is going to be at the Bethesda fountain, and it's an angel. And so it's, you know, and Lincoln's first inaugural address talked about the better angels of our nature. My brother-in-law took a number of shots, and I picked this one. For the second book takes place all in the winter, in terrible winter in Connecticut. And an important scene takes place when the two main characters, Aggie and Abe, sort of have a discussion, and it sort of sets the stage for how they're going to relate to each other. And it needed to be in a woody area by a pond. So this is supposed to be Connecticut. It was also taken by Douglas Ficklin. He has a wonderful website, by the way. His work is amazing. He usually does more abstract work, but don't tell anyone, it's actually not in Connecticut, it's in Vermont. But it fit the bill because it's snowing and it's a pond and there's a bench there. So that's how the covers came to be.
It's a beautiful photograph because enlarged and on the scrolling screen in the library where we have all of our programs scrolling, when the advertisement for this one scrolled and the cover of your book, it was beautiful to look at, which we've been doing all month.
I wanted to let people know that the library is having Indie Author Day. Well, Indie Author weekend.
Friday through Monday.
Friday through Monday, November 12th, is that right?
Yeah, it starts November 12th. It's the 12th, the 13th, and the 15th, actually. Right. So it's Friday, Saturday, and Monday.
Right, and they're going to be panel discussions. I'm going to be on one of the panels on Saturday, the 13th at 9 in the morning. I know, Andrew, you'll be wanting to get up at that 6 a.m. California time to be there. In addition, is starting the week after next, the library is going to have, there's so many wonderful local authors that are being featured, and the library is going to have tables set up. I'll be there for, you know, in and out over that 2-week period with my book. If anybody wants to buy either one of my books, they'll be cheaper than, you know, or check one out of the library, but they'll be cheaper than you can get them on Amazon. And I'll sign them for you. But there are going to be many other local authors and publishers that will be there. So it's
and people can also, if you want to purchase a book, one of Betty's books, you can let me know. I can let her know if you can't stop by when we're doing this. But we hope to have every hour of the day have authors seated at the table, a variety of authors. We have for Indie Author, approximately 52 authors have now registered to be part of it. So we're working on the schedule of the event, the Zoom event, as well as inside the library.
Betty, I just thought of another way that maybe you could get people running after you with contracts for a movie. If you could get on either CBS This Morning like with Gail King, who lives in Connecticut, or on NBC, the Today Show in the morning, maybe that will be a spark.
I'll wait to see if they call me.
You could give me a percentage of the deal.
Show up with a sign.
Yeah.
Sorry, Diane, you have to get in line for that percentage.
Yeah.
Hey, can I sneak in, Cindy, can I sneak in a word as president of the library to say thank you for the support that the library gives to all of our wonderful local authors. Of course, I'm very proud of Betty's work, but want to say thank you for what the library's done during the past 19 months of continuing to give great services to people in Norwalk, despite the pandemic and all the strain on the staff. And Cindy, you personally have just been terrific to develop so many wonderful programs that people can connect in our community, even remotely. It makes it seem so much less remote and so connected. And I want to really thank you and your colleagues for all that the library's been doing.
Well, thank you. It's important to us to be able to provide the services and to be able to do it both in person and virtually. It's been really, has helped us all through the pandemic.
That was really
Alex,
fantastic.
the man of the hour, the men of the hour are here. Just to cap off such a wonderful time spent with you, the plumbers are here.
Somebody else had a comment, I think.
Cindy and Bette, that was really wonderful. The reason that Barbara is off now is because we got an ad from Zoom that we should upgrade. And we couldn't get rid of it. So
well, thank you for coming.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I'm rereading the book, Bette, and it rereads just as well. And I have a signed copy from your original book thing. And I double checked the Wilton Library, and your book is still on the shelf.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
So hopefully Cindy will tell them, because she said she loved the second one, and she'll tell them, and I'll pitch it too.
That's great. Thank you so much. I mean, that's another wonderful, helpful thing. I mean, if you've liked the book, even if you didn't get it from Amazon, you can submit a review, and it helps it does something with their algorithm. So the book turns up more often. But also asking your library, if you don't live in, I mean, Norwalk Library has been wonderful, my home library, but asking your library to get a copy of the book is also really helpful. And
we've recorded the program today, and it will be posted on the library website, but it will also be on YouTube. And I will send the link to Bette, and she can forward it to people that may have missed it as well. And the other, I think Melissa had her hand raised. Did you want to say something?
I did. It took me almost all of the presentation to kind of formulate a question, because this book really, you tie together so many different threads. And what struck me most, and what struck me somewhat speechless, is some of the violent parts. Like, there are violent parts of the book, and the character Aggie goes through some really tough emotional processing. So I think my question is too complicated maybe, but I was just amazed at the end of how you handled the logistics of making it so believable. Like, I sort of feel like, I wonder if I could time travel at the end of it. I was like, maybe I have that special quality. And it's like, no, you don't. It's make-believe. It's make-believe. But the way you skillfully kept the fantasy, but made it so realistic, very deftly constructed. I'm still a little bit like, how did she do this? How did that last scene in the kitchen with the gun? I mean, the structural working out of how that would be readable to the reader, out of your head and into this design was super impressive. I was like, God, I mean, it's very engrossing, but it's also very skillful and well done.
Oh, thank you so much. That really means a lot to me. I have to give credit to my children. And Jessie, for all the way in through this whole journey, asked a really important question. She'd say, "Mom, really?" You know, and you know, that was in my head all the time. "Mom, really?" And that made me fight to make it believable.
Yeah.
Even though we're talking about senior citizens time traveling. My son, wonderful writer, his comment, well, he's had many, but his comment, he's a wonderful person to read your writing. And the feedback he gives is amazing. His point, which he had picked up at one of his writing classes at NYU, was it's not the wolf, it's the big bad wolf. And I think for this story, it had to be the big bad wolf, and it had to be, you know, the question that Viola poses, you know, what do you do if you know something terrible is going to happen, whether it's, you know, you're dealing with a pro-fascist organization or a, you know, any other kinds of evils that we might have to confront, and what are the choices you have to make. And you know, Andrew said your character has to face that. So I really give credit to my children who are have provided, so, you know, as writers themselves, I mean, you know, as readers themselves, you know, have given me so much important feedback.
Oh, thanks. They did a good job, and so did you.
I have just one more comment, which is I'm interested in publishing. So when you published the first one, I looked up the publisher and their website and so forth, and I really think it's a terrific group. So not only was I impressed with your book and how beautifully it was done, but I was also impressed with the publisher.
I have nothing but good things to say about them. I mean, they do what you need a publisher to do, which is they do exactly what they say they're going to do. You know, a build, and also the experience of editing with them was just like, for me, it was like so much fun, you know, so much fun and so interesting. But that's not like another whole discussion for people who are former English teachers.
Do you want to mention your book of short stories that is coming out?
Oh, yes. Kim is still here. And some of the other writers in the group are here. My wonderful sister, separated at birth, Marla, a wonderful writer. And there's so many good short story writers in that group. And I started the class because I just needed some way to kind of keep going. And my main interest was working on these novels. And I fell in love with writing short stories. Part of it is the spirit that Kim brings to the class and the encouragement she gives, and the group of people that have, you know, started writing together and have been writing together for, oh God, I don't know, Kim, a year and a half, 2 years now.
Oh no, closer to 3.
And I started falling in love with writing short stories. So the book is coming out. I've signed the contract. The book will be coming out, I hope, by the end of the year, but maybe not till the beginning of the next year. It's called Neighbors and Other Stories. And it's like my books that are like a gazillion genres. There are a gazillion genres in these stories. I have some that are romance. I have some that are humor. I have a little touch of sci-fi. Some of the characters that appear in the novels reappear in some of the stories. I have a story about Bernice. I have a story about Ruby, who hosts the time travelers when they go to the rallies. some historical fiction, they're all over the map. And the idea being that our neighbors are not just the people that live near us, but we're connected through history, through so many things. We're connected to other people through ideas, through literature, through experiences. We're connected to others. So that's the theme of the story. And none of them are very long, but there's going to be 32 stories in the book. And I'm excited to to see them in print.
Well, thank you. And if anyone else has any other comments, you can unmute yourselves and comment or put it in chat. But if not,
I just wanted to say Aggie, played by Meryl Streep, who lives in Connecticut part-time.
I would love that.
Great idea.
Diane's going to get this movie out.
It would certainly be fun. It would certainly be fun.
Well, thank you. This is great.
Thank everybody for coming. Thank you so much. And thank you to the library. It's been grand. And it's so nice to see, people that are so far away. Hi, Kathy. Thank you.